Hey guys, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can create this cool looking collage glitch effect. I'm going to walk you through how to create the different elements and then finally bringing them together to form the final piece. And the best thing, that this process is completely procedural. So once you're done, you can easily swap it with the different graphics and everything gonna get auto updated. Watch it till the end for some extra informative stuff. So with that said, let's begin. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to create our own elements. So in After Effects, I created a 1080p by 1080p composition with 24 FPS and 2 seconds long and named it ELE_1 as in element 1. I created a new shape layer and renamed it front. Then I took the pen tool and make sure the fill is turned off and the stroke is set around 200 pixels. After this, I drew this simple stroke and adjusted its point till I was happy with it. Then I opened up the shape layer and in the stroke properties went to the taper and set the start length to around 100%. Then I selected the layer and added the trim path modifier. In the beginning, I animated it from 0 to 100 and this will reveal the stroke. Then I went to the end around 1 second 18 frames mark and animated it from 100 to 0. After a RAM preview, you can see how the stroke is revealing and disappearing. Then I selected all the keyframes and hit F9 to easy ease them. I went to the graph editor and make sure you're in the speed graph and adjusted it so the beginning and the end are really fast. Now we need to animate the in-between parts because once it's revealed, it's just standing still there and that's not looking very good. So for that, I selected the path and started animating the top vertex point. I just moved forward a bit and then changed the point and repeated this process till it was fully animated. Now if I take a RAM preview, you can see how this thing was moving. After this, I duplicated this layer and put it behind our front layer and renamed it back. I hit P and changed the position of the stroke to go up a bit and also change its color. After this, I went through the animation and lined up these layers, the end vertex point to our front layer. This will basically give this shape a bit of 3D volume, and this is how it looks. For the final top part, I created another shape layer and renamed it front top. For this one, I made sure the stroke was off and the fill was on. And like before, I went frame by frame animating it. While I was animating it, I made sure I match up with the perspective as much as I could, but it doesn't need to be a 100% accurate. And after a RAM preview, this is what we got. Now it was time to add some colors. I dragged in this color guide and for the front part I clicked the stroke options and set it to linear gradient. Then I adjusted both the points and the colors. For the back part I repeated the same steps and a solid color was added to the front top layer. After this I dragged in this halftone texture and adjusted its position and rotation. Then placed it behind the front layer and used the track matte to add it. Then I duplicated the front layer again and put it behind the halftone layer to get back our front gradient back again. Then I added the fill effect to the halftone texture and adjusted it till I was happy with it. And this is how I created our first element. For the second element, I made the same comp and named it ELE_2. I started drawing the path and basically repeated the same steps, but this time I started with a gradient stroke, and after adjusting the colors, I added the trim paths and animated it like before. Now I did had to adjust the points a lot because the way these shape layer adjust their corners, but in the end I got them to a point where it was working. The next step was like the previous ones where I animated the point so it moves around throughout the time. Now in order to add those 3D looking depth, I used a shape layer with fill and no stroke in this scenario. I had to go almost frame by frame for some shapes, but it wasn't too hard. And after adjusting the final colors and adding the halftone texture, this is our second element done. When I was checking this element, I saw some of the parts were going out of the composition, so I parented everything to a null and scaled it down a bit. The third element was the easiest of them all. Again, same comp settings, and this time I drew a distorted star shape, then animated its scale. Again, I used the same type of easing. I animated the points in between the scale animation. Then after a while, I spread them from start to end, so it's wobble around from the very beginning. Then I added the halftone texture like before using track matte. Then I changed the halftone texture's color by adding in the fill effect. Once I was happy with the final star's color, I duplicated this layer again and put it behind our main star layer and changed its color. Then I added a transform effect and lowered down the scale, and this will create that fake 3D extruded look for the star. And this is our third and final element done. Now before we move to the next step, there's one more thing I did to these elements. I put this texture over everything and set the blending mode to multiply, and then use the preserve transparency button to add it over the element. This will add a bit more grungy textural look to these elements. Also added a curve and added some slight contrast to the texture. I repeated this exact process for the rest of the elements, and now with the elements done, let's move to our next phase. So I made a new 1920 by 1080p comp, 24 fps, and it's 5 seconds long, and named it placeholder. This is the comp where you place whatever graphics you want to get affected by this effect. For this example, I'm just using simple text layers. I created another new composition with the same dimension and time and named it title_1. After this, I dragged in our placeholder comp inside this composition. From the asset folder, I'll drag in this texture over to our comp. Now I made this texture by smashing together a whole bunch of images and halftone patterns. You can easily find different textures or make some of your own. I used the preserve transparency button to add this to our text. After this, I duplicated this title_1 comp in our project panel by hitting Ctrl D. Then double click to open it up and change the texture inside. I did this process another time and this time added this newspaper texture. Now we have all of our 3 titles here. After this, I created another new comp again, same dimensions, time, and named it final. I dragged in our title_1 comp inside it. Now it was time to add this triangular mask all over this comp. Now this is gonna take a while, but it's a necessary step. While drawing the masks, make sure it encompasses the entire graphics. I made sure when I was drawing them all the masks overlap each other so there is no bold spot left. It took me a while to create all of these, but it was worth it. Once all of the masks were done, I selected all 15 of them and set it to add. I added keyframes for the mask paths, then move forward around 6 frames and then slide those keyframes to that time. Then I came to the very beginning of the comp and started moving the masks around. And this is how it looks. After this, I started offsetting the keyframes for each of the masks, and this is how it looks after that. After this, I started animating the comp scale value randomly and turned all the keyframes into hold keyframes. And after a RAM preview later, this is how it looks. Now that we have done the hard work, let's build our final base animation. I duplicated our title_1 comp in the timeline. Then I went to the project panel and selected the title_2 comp. Then I held Alt and drag it over our duplicated title_1 comp. And once I saw the plus sign, I let it go to replace this comp with our title_2 comp. Then I duplicated the title_2 comp again and replaced it with the title_3 comp. Then I duplicated the title_3 comp again and replaced it with the placeholder comp. After this, I started offsetting these comps, and this is how the base animation looks now. Once done, I dragged in our element 1 and started placing it in an interesting way over this comp. Once happy, I started animating its position, scale and rotation throughout its own comp time. I turned all of those keyframes into hold keyframes, and after a RAM preview, you can see how it's adding more of that chaotic energy. I added another copy, but this time more on the right side, and repeated the same steps. Then it was time to add our second element, and again I repeated the same steps. For the third element, I dragged it all the way down in our layer stack and then moved it in the timeline to start it around 6 frames. And this is how the entire thing looks. Now let's add in some background and final touches. I dragged in these 4 textures and started placing them one after another and offsetting them in the timeline. So basically each of the background stays for around 6 frames. And for the last shot, when you are close to revealing the logo or the text, I added a simple blue background solid, and that's it. Now to tie things up, I added an adjustment layer and thrown in some noise to make it look less sharper. And then another adjustment layer with posterized time set to 12 to get that low frame rate look. And this is our final animation done. So this is how you create a stylish looking collage glitch animation all inside After Effects. As I said, it's completely procedural, so just go back to your placeholder comp and change your graphics there and it's going to get auto updated. Now that you know how to create this, I'll highly suggest you to start experimenting with different textures, shapes and other things to add over this and build a completely new look. So start experimenting. One extra thing I want to share is that now you have these elements and you can basically render them out and use them as stock elements. If I go into my element_1 comp, go to the composition and add it to the render queue, click on the output module and change the format to QuickTime, then click on the format option and change the video codec to Apple ProRes 4444. And make sure the channel is set to RGB plus alpha so it will render it with a transparent background. And once the render is done, import it and add in a tritone effect and you can recolor it to whatever you want. So in this way you can render these elements out and use them as stock element for your own projects. If you choose to download this project file from my Gumroad page, I've included all the textures inside this file along with this 3 rendered element with transparent background, so you can use them separately for your own projects. So if you like this video, leaving a like and subscribing to the channel would be awesome and highly appreciated. Thank you all for watching, take care of yourself, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye guys.